Japanese Grand Prix and the World Championship for the third time. He exits the corner, he crosses the line. Michael Schumacher wins. Michael Schumacher is world champion. He's a 5 times World Formula One champion. This is history. We were all around to see it, this historic moment when Michael Schumacher became the first 6-time World Formula One champion.
Yes, he's still in a world of his own after a hugely entertaining Formula One year. Hello there. Compliments of the season to all of you from the ITV F1 team. Schumacher, though, was driven hard by the younger generation before he won that 6th title. And over the next hour, we'll remember all the twists and turns of an absolutely great season. You're in good company as well. Ross Brawn has been in Schumacher's ear for the vast majority of his career. Once again, Ferrari have scooped up the Drivers' and the Constructors' Championships. Ross, Technical Director at Ferrari, with us this afternoon. And Ross, you are very welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
Alan McNish drove in every circuit in his role as test driver for the impressive Renault team. He's been a regular contributor to our programmes throughout the year. Alan, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and we'll talk, of course, later on. And Martin Brundle, grid walker extraordinaire, perceptive commentator, with us as well. Crikey, you've had some great races to talk about this year, Martin.
Haven't we ever? I've been commentating for 7 years now, and this was easily the most enjoyable. Some memorable races and 8 different winners too.
Absolutely. The season just about went to the last race in Japan with Kimi Räikkönen. Well, he was a mathematical contender for the title, and the reigning champion needing just a bit of help from his Ferrari teammate, Rubens Barrichello.
I need Rubens to win. That is enough already.
Win number 3 of the season then for the young Brazilian.
I keep going for a victory myself, honestly, but it will be very difficult from where I am, so I have to make the best out of what I can.
He's lost his front wing. Michael Schumacher has lost his front wing. Whoa, what's this? Michael Schumacher, Ralf Schumacher, straight on.
It has been a very tough race, honestly, probably one of my toughest. How many people wrote us off, how many people wrote things about us, outspoken things. And here we are, we're back, and we never give up. We're always there, we always fight. It's just a huge, big family, which we all be proud of being a part of it.
A family affair, Ross. Is that the secret of your success?
Yeah, I think so. It's a very close team, and I think it's always in adversity that you see the strength of a team. And we rely on each other a lot, and there's no blame. It's one group.
Started off very slowly, didn't you, by Ferrari standards anyway. Came to Europe, came to Imola, and a very emotional weekend for Michael after his mum died, but he delivered at the end of it. Terrific strength of character.
Yeah, you can never write him off. He has unusual strengths. It was a difficult start to the season. I think the euphoria of the year before. We were all very tight at the beginning of the season. We weren't performing properly, and Imola broke that bad cycle. So it was the beginning of a better run for us.
And when you got to Austria, Martin, there was a remarkable scene in Austria when, well, I've heard about sort of keeping cool under fire, but a real sort of furnace next to his ear in the pits here.
Yes, Jim, but Grand Prix drivers are not frightened of fire anymore. We're so well protected. This is just costing him a lot of time on the racetrack. But Michael really did keep his head supremely well. every driver, I think, would have done the same or similar thing there, but he went back onto the racetrack and won the Grand Prix, which shows an extremely cool mentality, doesn't it?
What was your view of him keeping his cool there?
Well, the biggest frustration was the time being lost. As Martin said, they're pretty well protected, and we've got provisions for, let's say, minor fires. So I think the biggest frustration was we were in a tight race and we were losing time. But Michael didn't hesitate. He just waited for it to be put out.
Is it his racing brain that sets him apart, Ross? He's forced off in the European Grand Prix by Montoya. He keeps his cool, he keeps the engine running, gets a bit of help from the marshals as well. I mean, how many drivers would have the wherewithal to do that?
No, he's interested in every aspect of how the team works. I mean, this situation now, 2 years ago, the rules changed to say that the marshals can push you as long as your engine keeps running. Now, he knew that, but how many team principals down the pit lane said it was illegal that we got to push? So Michael knew the regulation, and that's a fact.
You felt at the time, Ross, that Montoya's move around the outside was a bit unreasonable. Do you still feel that now?
I got sucked into the emotion of it, I must admit. I mean, I feel the races as well, so I was a bit harsh afterwards. But, you know, Juan Pablo's pretty rough at times, and some people like that. But it's cost him, as we saw later in the season. So I think he has to think about his approach in the future if he's going to become a world champion, because I think, you know, he could have come off just as badly in that situation as Michael did. So
there was another pivotal and very political race at Monza later on in the year, which you had a fantastic result, because there's a lot of bad feeling about the Michelin tyre situation, and your two main competitors were put off their stroke a little bit with having to change their tyres. But this, do you think this was the turning point of the season?
It was. I mean, after Hungary, we had a desperate race in Hungary, and we went back and we just sat down and went through every point, analysed everything that was happening with the same people who'd won the championship the year before. So the ingredients were still there. It wasn't quite gelling. So we went back, we sat down, we talked it through, the drivers joined in the discussions, and we had two really good tests before the Monza race, and it all gelled again. But the difference is so small. The difference is minute, so we just had to find that little bit.
Okay, thanks for the moment, Ross. When you rejoin us, we're going to remember some of the crucial moments of F1 2003. Remember the start of the German Grand Prix at Hockenheim? Kimi Räikkönen challenging to get back to the top of the championship, failing to get beyond the first corner. We had those 8 different Grand Prix winners. At the end of it all, Kimi Räikkönen was just a couple of points behind Michael Schumacher. In third place, Juan Pablo Montoya's challenge faded late on, and the Colombian should have made a better start as well.
2003 was a season of elation and frustration for Juan Pablo Montoya. At times it looked so promising for the precocious Colombian. In Australia he had a commanding lead. The car looked strong. What could go wrong?
He spun, Montoya spun, backs it into the wall, no damage will be done, and he'll get away again. Coulthard leads the Grand Prix.
It was a bit unlucky, and I can't say anything, you know. I made a mistake and I had to pay for it, and that's the price.
An honest appraisal of an expensive error. Second place was scant compensation. Throwing away the win in Australia was bad enough, but there was far worse to come for Montoya in Malaysia. This time he was an innocent victim.
Side by side, Schumacher and David Coulthard, and a contact. Trulli and Schumacher make contact. Montoya has been hit as well.
After a lengthy pit stop for another rear wing, Juan Pablo clambered back to finish 12th. There were no points in Brazil either, where Montoya was joined by numerous other casualties in the tyre barrier at the treacherous turn 3. It wouldn't be the last walk home for Juan Pablo. By Austria, it seemed his luck had changed. The lead was his. Then this.
Montoya's blown his engine. I don't believe it. What rotten luck for him and for BMW Williams.
It was his only engine failure all season. Talk about bad timing. Canada promised a battle royal between Michael Schumacher and the Williams drivers, but Montoya's chances were scuppered by this lapse of concentration. He recovered sufficiently to maintain a podium position, but it could have been a win. Then came a late season charge, and by Indianapolis, Montoya was very much in the hunt for championship honours.
I think it's very important to get good points, you know, come out of here with good points. You know, anything can happen. I think Kimi will be strong as well. But, you know, the guy in front of me is Michael at the moment.
Perhaps the Ferrari he should have been watching out for was Rubens Barrichello. The stewards took a dim view of this overtaking manoeuvre and handed Montoya a stop-go penalty. This certainly wasn't in his plan, and nor was victory for Michael Schumacher. Second place for Kimi Raikkonen ensured the championship fight would go down to the wire, but sixth for Juan Pablo wasn't enough. He'd thrown away his chance of a world championship.
Unlike Montoya and Schumacher, Kimi Raikkonen won just a single race in Malaysia. He thought he'd aced the Brazilian Grand Prix, but for a misunderstanding that made Fisichella the rightful winner. What kept Kimi in the hunt was his consistent scoring. Between those 10 podium finishes, though, were too many retirements. In Spain, Raikkonen collided with Antonio Pizzonia at the back of the grid. At the German Grand Prix in Hockenheim, he was caught up in this big accident with Ralf Schumacher and Rubens Barrichello. While at the Nürburgring,
Raikkonen has blown up. I don't believe it. Out front, looking for his second Grand Prix of the season.
The race was quite easily ours, but then everything went wrong. But that's racing and it's bad luck.
Kimi's championship was effectively ended at the US Grand Prix, this time by an Indianapolis rain shower. In the dry, Raikkonen was set to beat Schumacher, forcing a championship showdown. But the weather gods must be Ferrari fans.
Raikkonen certainly seems quite strong. He'll be hoping to keep it going to Suzuka, as here comes Michael Schumacher.
And this is the Bridgestone Inter versus the Michelin Wet, no contest.
Kimi would have to win the last race, with Schumacher failing to score. The championship as good as over.
It's even more difficult now than it was before the race, but we did what we could, and just wasn't enough today.
Raikkonen had problems with the new one-shot qualifying, often trying to do too much too soon. Starting 20th in Canada would lose him the championship lead. He'd never get it back. Another factor was the failure of McLaren's new car. Had the 2003 model been reliable and raceable, Kimi could have kept well in touch with Ferrari and Williams. Instead, the old car and engine looked breathless around the power circuit of Monza. This young Finn has just finished his third season in Formula One. He's had moments of greatness and madness, but one message comes through loud and clear. Give him the right car, and Kimi Raikkonen is ready to win world championships.
See it that way, Alan? Do you see Kimi Raikkonen as a future world champion?
He's certainly got all the ingredients to be one of the guys that's challenging in the next 2 or 3 years. I think we saw a couple of mistakes in qualifying. The question is whether he can learn from those and not make them in 2004. But so far, he's certainly got the ability.
He had the first win of his career, the only win so far in Malaysia, in that searing heater at Sepang. An emotional day for him and for the McLaren team boss, Ron Dennis, as well.
Yeah, Ron certainly, he's really locked in with Kimi quite quickly in the mentality aspect of it, and I think that's something that's going to be stronger and stronger as it develops. It's something that we saw him working very well with Mika Häkkinen in the past as well.
And he gave a terrific challenge to Michael Schumacher for the title in Brazil. He had a good race there, and at one point he thought he was going to win there. Of course, Fisichella was declared the winner subsequently. I mean, he's had a very, very good season, and just a couple of points short at the end of it, Martin.
Yes, I mean, he made a couple of crucial errors, as we've seen in qualifying. Remember, he outbraked himself at Silverstone too and gave away some points. He really could have beaten Michael Schumacher this year. What impressed me most was the confidence that the young guy had. In treacherous conditions like this in Brazil, he was still really getting on it, and he would not give up on that World Championship, even though it looked impossible from time to time.
And when we look at the Williams challenge, I guess they're trying to get the car out a lot earlier this season, aren't they? They were upset at the way they faded away towards the end. It was always an interesting pairing, wasn't it, Ralf Schumacher and Montoya? Never quite sure the relationship between the two of them.
Well, that's right. I mean, they've been fighting each other all the way through. They started so badly, Williams. They gave away a lot of points in the beginning of the year. And again, a team that will feel they lost this year's championship rather than anything else. But this is Montoya pulling another great overtaking move. We saw it on several occasions through the year. He would pay a high price for that later on at Indianapolis, where he was penalised, of course.
Absolutely. Well, this season they changed the rules and judged purely on the improved entertainment value. It worked. We had Friday testing at the circuits, one-hit qualifying, and then the cars, of course, confined and untouchable in Parc Fermé until just before the starter on Sunday afternoon. Well, to start with, Alan, the Friday testers were ridiculed as track cleaners, but crikey, you and the Renault team, you swept up a few points, didn't you, after those Friday testing sessions?
No, I think it was important to actually make it work. If you're going to do the Friday testing, if you're going to take that challenge, you had to be prepared. And Flavio Briatore, right from the outset, was very clear in the way he was going to attack it, and it certainly worked for us. We had an area to exploit, and we did it.
Ross, were you surprised that it worked so well for the Friday testers? Because I thought it was a crazy mistake by Renault, but it was very smart in the end. Would you, if it was still in place for 2004, would you do that?
I don't think we would, because of the amount of other testing we like to do. But I think where it helped them is that the new configuration of racing. We only had 1 hour to set the car up, and then Friday afternoon was qualifying. So not only did they get the Friday morning, but the amount of testing or preparation we were able to do for a normal weekend was reduced as well. And I think the two together is what made it such an advantage.
Yes, but for me it's what made the season that it did upset the grid, and it made it a challenge. People had to fix their race strategy so early on in the weekend. It was surely that was the double sixes that kept being thrown to give us such an unusual grid.
Yeah, and we made the comments about Kimi's mistakes, but of course all the regulations are built to make it less predictable. And Kimi got caught out in qualifying a few times, but so did Michael. I think everybody did. And the whole purpose of these regulations was to make the whole show much less predictable, which for us was not a good thing, because our strength was consistency. So we weren't so keen on the changes. But
did you feel they were anti-Ferrari?
Well, it's a moot point, Jim. I mean, we have this constant debate about the FIA favouring Ferrari or what have you, but of course there was a whole raft of changes over the winter, none of which I honestly think were in our favour. But we accepted them because it was felt it was good for the future of Formula 1, and we did the best we could. And we were off balance at the beginning of the season. We didn't do a very good job for the first few races until we adjusted. So it was certainly a factor in the resurgence of Formula 1. A lot of it was just the strength of the other teams. I mean, McLaren and Williams really started to do a good job again, and of course Renault. But the rules made it much less predictable.
Okay, well, let's just turn our attention now to David Coulthard. Once again, DC, the British #1, but finishing a very disappointing 7th in the championship, and after everything started so well at Albert Park, Melbourne as well. Well, Martin, you manage David, don't you? How do you explain what happened to him this season?
Well, he had an opportunity to win the first 3 Grand Prix, and he was a bit unlucky. He obviously won in Australia, and to take the Melbourne race. And then in Malaysia, an electrical problem when he was clearly ahead of Raikkonen, the eventual winner. And in Brazil, he was the moral victor, really. But then the race was stopped and backtracked a lap. It cost David dearly, but you can if only all day long. He didn't get the job done in the middle of the season. And, you know, when he looks back on that, that could be the critical moment when McLaren started looking around and thinking about taking Montoya on. So it really has been a costly season for David.
Was it the qualifying that was he just couldn't get round that single lap qualifying? Was there more to it than that?
I think he got a bit scrambled in the head with this one-lap system. I think it's the equivalent of the yips for golfers. Luckily, he got it together by the end of the season, but he just... I can imagine the pressure there must be going out with single-lap qualifying with the eyes of the world burning a hole in the back of your neck, just watching you and you only try to manhandle a Formula 1 car with a one-lap wonder, and it obviously got to David.
Yeah, in Japan he finished just behind Kimi Raikkonen, didn't he, Alan? But I mean, the gap between the two of them, 40 points overall behind the Finn. He was blown away a bit this season, wasn't he?
Certainly in terms of overall points, there's no question about it. But I do think, as Martin said, if he had the momentum building at the beginning of the season, then that gets your confidence up. And as a driver, you need confidence. You need confidence in the car and in the team. And once it's rolling, as we saw with Kimi, and as we saw with the change with Michael when he resurged back into the championship, it's so, so important.
And has he got the desire to up his game in what's going to be a very, very crucial season next year?
Yes, we've just seen the end of the Japanese Grand Prix, the final race, where he really drove brilliantly. He came to find me straight after getting out of the car to say, this cannot be my last Grand Prix next year at this time. He badly wants to drive. And he's going to have to perform like that all through the season to give us a chance of finding him a competitive ride.
Absolutely, because if he doesn't perform, it would seem that he could well be approaching his last season at McLaren, because in 2005 Juan Pablo Montoya is on the move.
Williams gave Juan Pablo Montoya his big break. They took him on as test driver in '97 and groomed him to be a World Championship contender. So why did it all turn sour? The split started at the French Grand Prix when Montoya felt Williams engineers made mid-race strategy calls that favoured teammate Ralf Schumacher. Montoya was furious. He lost interest both in the rest of the race and, it would appear, with the team itself. Montoya also felt Williams didn't value him enough. It's thought Ralf has paid as much as £5 million a year more than Juan Pablo. Hearing about the domestic going on next door, Ron Dennis came in with an offer Montoya couldn't refuse, and a deal to join McLaren was done. For 2005 then, McLaren will field the two drivers Michael Schumacher fears most, Montoya and Kimi Raikkonen. It'll be an explosive partnership, but what of 2004? The intrigue has just begun.
Thank you, Ted. Well, how do you handle that in 2004 when you know you've got a driver in your team and he's on his way to a big, big rival the season after?
I think a lot depends on how competitive Williams are. I mean, if Williams have a 1 second advantage over everyone, then of course it won't be too difficult. But if they're in a challenging year, then I think it's an almost impossible situation. And I think it's something which McLaren have calculated. You know, Williams are on their strongest opposition. They're both on the same tyres. We've got the BMW Mercedes aspect. And in my view, it's been a strategy by McLaren to upset Williams.
How big a temptation would it be for Williams to have cut their losses and say, have him now?
I'm sure they've considered it. I guess they've got no viable alternative. But he could have gone on garden leave for a year, which is popular with engineers, but could happen with drivers, I guess. But I think it's a very unfortunate situation, and whatever they say now, you know, we're all going to concentrate, this is not going to get to us, we're going to do a proper job next year. First time there's some strife in the team,
it's going to be very interesting.
It'll all come up to the surface.
Well, for a long time this year, Ralf Schumacher, Montoya's teammate at Williams, was the most consistent driver of them all. He scored in every race till the British Grand Prix in mid-July. At his next race, at his home Grand Prix, it all went pear-shaped right at the start, Martin.
It did indeed. He got away well, and Ralf was penalised for this, but I really don't think it was anybody's fault. You cannot predict where a car is 2 rows behind you, and they're just all aiming for the same piece of tarmac into turn 1, doing 140 miles an hour even from a standing start. And you can see there again Ralf heading towards taking the normal turn-in point of the corner, squeezes Barrichello, who squeezes Raikkonen, who was already on the outside. And Raikkonen was probably a little bit ambitious, but in my view, a racing incident.
When you look at Ralf Schumacher, and he had a couple of good races, a victory in the European and then a win in France in the next race, do you still have that feeling that he's overshadowed by Michael when it comes to it? And do you still wonder if he can really deliver?
Well, Michael can turn it on all day, every day, and Ralf can't. When Ralf's good, he's very good, but then he sort of goes off the boil and we really don't see too much of him. And here he is at the Nürburgring, the European Grand Prix, winning with a great performance.
How do you see that relationship, Alan McNish, between the two of them? Do you think that Ralf is still essentially baby brother? Is he ever going to go past Michael?
I think it's very, very difficult when you're second in line because you're not breaking new ground and you're always being seen as the potential next one, and you're being viewed in that respect, so it's an extremely hard thing. I personally would not like to be the younger brother of a 6-time world champion.
Do you think he has got the potential to become as good as his brother, or is this as good as he gets this season?
No, I don't think so. I think he's got the potential to win races, and if the circumstances are right, to win a championship, but I don't believe he's got the potential to be as good as Michael.
How do you view that relationship between the two Schumachers, between Ralf and Michael?
Well, it's I don't know Ralf that well, I've not worked with him, but I see the things that Michael brings to a team, and I don't really see those with Ralf. And I think Ralf, as Alan said, can win races. You know, he's a very good driver, and I think when everything comes right at Williams, then Ralf could be in a position to win a world championship. But I think it's those races where you shouldn't really win, where Michael gets them, and that's what makes the difference. And I don't think Ralph's ever won a race that he shouldn't have won. He wins races he should win, but there's never been a race where you thought Ralf was the reason why they won that race.
So for the time being, then, Michael Schumacher is the governor. But this year, the young pretenders have been really snapping at his heels. There's Fernando Alonso, already the best Spaniard ever. How long before he is #1? While Jenson Button still chasing that elusive first podium, and we'll have his thoughts on that and marriage next. 2003, the big prizes, the drivers and the constructors' titles, they stayed put at Ferrari, and Brazilian Rubens Barrichello did his bit. He scored 65 points. He won at Silverstone and at Suzuka.
Yeah, Jim, for me, his drive at the British Grand Prix at Silverstone was just absolutely exceptional. Probably the drive of the year. I don't know how you feel about that, Ross.
No, it was a fantastic performance. And Rubens has this problem of driving in the shadow of Michael, but he is a fantastic Grand Prix driver. He's grossly underrated, and we think a lot of him in the team. But Silverstone was a beautiful race for him. It was just fantastic, and I think he's one of the best overtakers in the business. If you look back through his career, last year when we had the options with the strategies, we'd always be prepared to put him on a light fuel load and go for overtaking, and he'd do the business. So he's a great driver.
That's a valuable asset, isn't it, being able to work your way through the traffic. And the way he set Raikkonen up, for example, Alan, as a driver you know well, just how hard you have to think about that, and how, and when he made it stick through Bridge Corner was just sensational, wasn't it?
He just pulled him in. And he set him up so well, as you said, coming out of Club and then coming into Abbey, and it was such a difficult little section there with the cambers of the road, with the circumstances starting behind him and that sort of thing, and I think he drove fantastically that day, but I also think he's driven some excellent races throughout the season.
But it's strange that Michael always gets the roll of the dice, with, it seems, with reliability, and if you think back to Hungary, I mean, Ross, how often have you seen a three-wheel Ferrari in your time there?
It is unfortunate. I mean, I can't explain why Rubens always gets the bad rub. I mean, there were reasons why we had that failure, but they weren't down to Rubens. We had a structural problem with suspension due to the way that Rubens was hitting a curb. But that's not Rubens' fault, it's our fault. Why Rubens doesn't quite get it to fall into place is a mystery. People say that Michael's, as well as being the best, is one of the luckiest drivers as well. Is that a fair comment? Well, we tend to have a saying that luck is preparation waiting for an opportunity. So we try not to think about luck, but I don't know how we explain it. I mean, I know there's, and everyone's going to groan at this, is this feeling that we favour Michael, we don't favour Rubens, but 99.9% of the time it's exactly the same for both drivers. There are one or two occasions when we have to make a decision in a race or some other circumstance, but in terms of equipment, engineers, everything else, the guys get the same equipment. And quite honestly, if Rubens was the guy leading the championship by 30 or 40 points, and we had to make a decision, we would favour Rubens in those circumstances. But we've never reached that point. It could happen, because Rubens has been pushing Michael harder and harder, and probably this year is the hardest Rubens has pushed Michael since they've been together. How crucial is the relationship between the drivers, and how important is it that they get on? I think it's crucial, and you know, we don't set our drivers up against each other. I know there's one or two teams where that seems to happen, but we won't accept that. They have to work together. It's a very complex thing, of Formula 1 team, because you have a huge group of people all working to a common objective, and then you have these two guys who are trying to beat each other within the team. Yeah. And it's quite a tricky thing to manage, but we have a totally open relationship between the drivers. All the data is available, the engineers, we all debrief in the same room, there's no secrets, and but it is complex, the relationship between two drivers, but they get on very well, and as good as any two drivers who are trying to beat each other have done. Okay, thanks, Ross. Well, when it comes to deciding the driver of the year, Renault's Fernando Alonso has plenty of supporters in the second race in Malaysia. Still only 21, remember, he was on pole. Later in the season in Hungary, Alonso claimed his slice of Formula 1 history.
Renault surprised many in the pit lane by turning out what was, by common consent, the best handling chassis of them all. The weak link was their engine, down on power compared to the top three teams. But on tracks that reward a well-balanced car rather than pure power, Renault excelled. Their win in Hungary was an important milestone.
Fernando Alonso wins his first Grand Prix, and he becomes the youngest man ever to win a Formula 1 Grand Prix.
I had the youngest pole in Malaysia, and now the youngest victory for me means a lot. And you know, I hope to be the youngest world champion.
Italian Jarno Trulli finally proved that he can race well, with some solid performances leading up to this podium in the second half of the season. But the real story of Renault's year is Fernando Alonso. All season long, this Oxford resident has amused, delighted and impressed everyone in F1.
Go. We can go faster, but we don't want.
He also plays a mean card trick.
Have one card.
I'm impressed.
Is this one?
That's the one.
It's not broken.
Fernando would have won other races, but for poor reliability. At the final round in Japan, he was in second position, right behind eventual winner Rubens Barrichello, and with one less pit stop to make, before the car gave up and frustration kicked in.
Looking back, it was a fantastic season for me, but in this moment it's a little bit disappointing.
Make no mistake, this little Spaniard is F1's next superstar.
Yeah, Raikkonen and Alonso, they'll have all sorts of battles down the road, won't they? You work very closely alongside him. Has he got the real commitment to be an F1 star?
He's obviously got the speed, and we saw in Hungary that he's got the mental capability to win a race. The thing that impressed me most about Fernando this year is when he made a mistake, he didn't make it again. He learned very, very quickly, and he was very open to other people giving him a bit of advice or a little bit of understanding.
Brave or reckless in Brazil, Martin?
Reckless, really. Very underwhelming piece of driving. He may not have made that mistake again, but he shouldn't have made it in the first place. Yellow flags waving, and he kept his foot in. But what is impressive after that is it didn't frighten him. He got straight back on the gas at the next race and started delivering again. And for me, that is always a pivotal moment in the career of a young driver.
You were a bit upset that the fellow who caused the crash ended up on the podium, weren't you?
Yeah, of course, with the count-back system, everybody was confused. The trophy was given to the wrong winner, and it is a system we have in Formula One to cover certain circumstances. But yes, you can be the cause of the red flag and then still step up on the podium.
Triumph in Hungary, bit of history as well. 8th different driver to win in the season, aged 22 years and 26 days, the youngest ever F1 winner.
I'm a bit concerned that Grand Prix cars are becoming too easy to drive. Alonso is absolutely brilliant, but we've seen kids recently out of pedal cars in December doing tests down in Spain, getting on the pace. But the pace is one thing, turning it into a dominant victory like this is very much the mark of a future champion.
Too easy, Ross?
It's different. I don't know how we go back, but I think Martin's right. I think the consistency. The guys may get the pace, but then it's putting everything else together. I have some friends at Renault. Obviously it was Benetton before, now Renault, and they tell me that all the signs they see with Fernando is the same as the signs they saw with Michael when he joined the team. So I think he's...
That's high praise.
He's a fantastic prospect. I think one comment I'd make about him is that you'd never see Michael Schumacher criticize a team. He knows how things work. And Fernando let his emotions run a little bit high on occasions and made some comments about the performance of the team. Now, you make those comments inside the team, and you make them as hard as you like, but you don't make them outside the team because you need to unite the people. Okay. And that's the only thing I'd say about him. He just needs to learn.
He's still a baby.
Yeah, he's got to learn that side of things.
Okay, Ross, thank you. What about the man, though, pushed out of Renault by Alonso, our own Jenson Button? 4th places in Austria and Japan, as good as it got for Jenson his first season at BAR. But he was consistently better than the moody former world champion Jacques Villeneuve, as Louise Goodman discovered. Jenson, still only 23, has a glint in his eye after another very valuable year.
The first few races we were very, very strong. We had some very good qualifying, but couldn't really get the result in the race through whatever reasons. Halfway through the season we started getting those results. In Austria I was 4th, and then obviously Monaco was a very up and down race for me, whereas I qualified 3rd on Thursday qualifying, and then had the big crash on Saturday. The next real good race was towards the end of the season. Indianapolis and Suzuka, which again were both very good races. I led both of them, which is great, and we had a good end to the season in Suzuka.
What effect did that Monaco accident have? Other than the
headache, yeah, headaches for a while, yeah. It was strange. It was a very strange feeling afterwards, because the next day I felt fine. You know, it's a crash. You know, it's inevitable. We're going to have accidents now and again. But then a couple of days later, when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, oh, that was quite heavy.
There were some good results. There were the 2 fourth places, but still no podium.
Yeah, I can't believe how many times I've been asked that question about the podium. But it's going to happen, definitely. You know, maybe I'm one of these drivers that their first podium's a win. We've just got to wait and see. But I've been so unlucky, you would not believe. I mean, I don't normally believe in luck, but to be in a podium position on many occasions and have failures or whatever happen, it's very, very unusual. And to be running in the lead in Indianapolis for 15 laps and in a very strong car, it was a great feeling. And then suddenly to go from that to nothing, it was pretty tough for everyone. And we really did need Suzuka to bring ourselves back up, I think.
It was a great result. Both drivers in the points in Suzuka, which secured 5th place in the championship for the team. What difference does that make?
It makes a big difference to the team. It was a great weekend, and to have Takuma as a teammate there, you're always unsure of how they're going to cope, but he coped very well under the pressure, and to get both cars in the points in 4th and 6th was a big boost for the team.
What about on a personal note? They're going to be wedding bells in 2004?
We'll have to wait and see. Not in this season, definitely not, you know, but it's not going to make any difference to my racing. That's what I love doing, and she's got her own thing to do, so, which is great. I'd love to see her at every race and with me all the time, but it's nice that she's got her own thing to do, so I can concentrate a bit more on what I do.
He's waiting till the end of next season. And what did you make of Jenson Button and that relationship with Villeneuve that ended up with Villeneuve, well, out of Formula One?
Well, I thought Button in the back end of the season was sensational, did a great job, and I think he'll pick up the mantle of team leader well. Villeneuve said, if Button beats me, I'll probably give up, and he's had to. I mean, whether he knew when his car caught fire and had a smoky retirement at the Indianapolis race, whether he knew that was his final race or not, we don't know. But for Villeneuve, really a horrible season. And this is a great shame for Formula One. If you were doing a dream grid for 2004, Jacques Villeneuve's name would surely be on it.
Yeah, I'm very, very sad to see Villeneuve out of it. I know he's made a few enemies along the way. 97 world champion and 100 races without a win. I suppose that tells its own story, Martin.
Well, absolutely, but he was the world champion, and it's hard enough to win races, let alone championships, and you can never take that away from Villeneuve. He could so easily have won the championship the year before, and he beat Michael Schumacher to do it, so it was a very worthy title that he gained there.
Still the driver that could do well in a Ferrari, surely.
Yes, not with Michael there, I don't think. I think their history has been a bit too difficult in the past. But I agree with Martin. It's a shame that he's not in Formula One. He's a character. And I think in the right circumstance, he could have enjoyed more success. But the sort of writing was on the wall when you know, they had those difficult negotiations during the year, and you could see that David Richards was bringing Jenson on. So it is a shame to lose him. Because, in fact, I think we'll only have... Michael will be the only world champion on the grid next year.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's... Well, it's good for us. It's not good for, it's not good
Right.
for Formula One.
OK, Ross, thank you. Well, next, a little spot of indulgence, really. Statistically, Michael Schumacher is the best ever, but is he really better than the Argentine Juan Manuel Fangio, winner of 5 titles in the 50s? Well, you pays your money, and you can make your choice. Brilliant Formula One season, checking down the grid. Well, survival was the name of the game for Minardi, but the quartet comprising Jordan, Toyota, Sauber and Jaguar were involved in a ferocious battle for those precious points. Ted Kravitz kicks off with the Big Cats.
Jaguar's secret weapon was Mark Webber, a revelation in only his 2nd year in the top flight. Qualified and raced like a future winner, and gave the team some much-needed direction and focus. The second car was a thorn in Jaguar's side. The team never really believed in Antonio and clumsily got rid of him mid-season. Justin Wilson had a difficult job from then on. Not even a valuable point gained in the USA was enough to keep him his seat. He's replaced for 2004 by the novice Austrian, Christian Klien. Mark Webber picked up points whenever he could, but his best finish was still just 6th. Jaguar are under no illusions that there's still a long way to go.
We had a few reliability issues in the first few races, and then the points were slowly filtering in through the middle of the year. The cars been very, very reliable, which is important these days. And good baseline for next year, laying the foundations, hopefully.
Sauber's season was mediocre up to the US Grand Prix. Then, on a wet track, they used their Bridgestone tyre advantage to score 5th with Heidfeld and a podium for Frentzen. 10 points in one afternoon. As a token of gratitude, the team then sacked both drivers, to be replaced next season by Massa and Fisichella. A solid performance for just their second year in the sport, Toyota at least made progress up the grid. Their final finishing position of 8th doesn't truly reflect the drivers' efforts. The cars had pace, especially at power circuits such as Silverstone, where De Matter and Panis held a 1-2 for part of the race, and then at Suzuka, when they qualified 3rd and 4th. The arrival of technical boss Mike Gascoigne from Renault should help cure Toyota's lack of race experience. Too often they made strategy mistakes, pitting the cars at the wrong time, and points were thrown away through recurring mechanical failures. It could only happen at Jordan. Win a race, then suffer your worst season on record, starved of money and second last in the constructors' table. Fisichella's win in Brazil was lucky, but he still kept out of trouble in the toughest of conditions, and that deserves credit. Some credit also to teammate Ralf Furman, who wrestled his car home to a points finish in Spain. The rest of his season was tarnished with failures and accidents, not least of which this rear wing failure in Hungary. It put him out of action for 2 races.
Really, in general, it's been about the worst season we've had. You know, reliability issues, performance, everything together just mounted up to being not so good.
Paul Stoddart's team competed the whole season on the edge of bankruptcy, rescued only by the intervention of F1 ringmaster Bernie Ecclestone. Stoddart saved some cash by selling Justin Wilson to Jaguar, leaving Dutch veteran Jos Verstappen and Dane Nicolas Chiesa to prop up the back of the grid. Their single-season highlight was in France when Verstappen was last to run on a drying track, and the inevitable top Friday qualifying time helped give the boys a much-needed boost.
And Minardi are still around, of course, which is a big thing for them. But what about your old team, Jordan? What a horrible season for them.
Yes, it wasn't a competitive year, was it? They didn't have the pace. Taking Vodafone to court was a costly experience, both in terms of reputation and finances for Eddie Jordan. I think he'll need Bernie Ecclestone's help into the future. The haves and the have-nots are getting further apart, and Eddie's one of the have-nots. I hope he can come up smelling of roses again.
Let's hope so. Ralf Furman thrown in at the start of the season, thrown out at the end of it.
Yes, Ralf, a difficult season for him, a very nasty accident as we saw in Hungary. I'm not sure he really demonstrated enough pace to stay in Formula One purely on merit. He's got a half a chance of staying in the Jordan, but I think he'll have to consider himself lucky if he gets that drive again.
And Justin Wilson produced some brilliant starts for Minardi, went to Jaguar, and he too now finds himself on the outside looking in.
Justin didn't make the most of his opportunity at Jaguar. I think he could do better than he showed in that car, and it's a shame because maybe he won't get a second chance. He may be back in the Minardi for 2004, but he's got to perceive, I think, the Jaguar opportunity as a lost one.
How about Fangio and Michael Schumacher? Totally different eras, totally different cars. How do you compare them?
It is so difficult to compare. I mean, obviously they have some qualities which are the same. I mean, their ability to drive a car is the same with both guys. But Fangio had to be so brave to drive those things. Michael's brave, but not at the same extent. But then Michael needs the technical competence to be a modern Formula One driver. It is far more complex. So they had different qualities for sure, but both exceptional guys.
Look at those things, Alan. Would you fancy driving one of those?
Absolutely not. There is no way I'd like to have the engine sitting in front of me and a gear lever between my legs without very much to help you in braking stability and things. But there's one thing that's clear in my mind anyway, that a driver in the 50s who was world champion and demonstrated such ability, if he was in his youth in the 90s or in 2000 or in Michael's era, then he would be able to attack and do exactly the same sort of job. But it is so different that I don't think you can compare them.
A lot of people feel that Michael Schumacher should retire now. Do you agree with them?
Well, I'd say there's 19 drivers on the grid that say he should retire. But I think that Michael will continue until he really starts feeling the pressure from the likes of Kimi and from Fernando, and he realises that maybe his day is starting to be numbered. The intelligent thing is to retire at the top.
Is he going to retire?
Well, it's up to him. For my money, absolutely, unquestionably, he should not retire. And it's none of our business, by and large. He's 34 years old. He's more than fast enough to beat the lot of them at the moment. They've got to go and seize that World Championship away from him to 2004, and he's a great race driver still.
Very quickly, Rossi's going to carry on, isn't he?
Yes, he is. He loves it. and he won't retire until he stops enjoying it. And people say he's 6 times world champion, so he should retire, but why? He loves it. It's his life. And until the point comes when he doesn't love it, then he'll carry on driving. I don't know when that will be.
And so follow that. In 2004, we've got a potential 18 races, 8 flyaways kicking off as usual in Australia in early March, 2 new venues, Bahrain in April, China towards the end of September, the British Grand Prix in its traditional mid-July date. Austria's gone, Canada has survived, just. France is pending an FIA meeting on Wednesday. We're delighted to see Spa back where it belongs in late August. Right, our thanks to Alan, thanks to Ross, and thanks to Martin Brundle as well from us all here. We hope you're enjoying the festive season as F1 2003 is going to flash in front of your eyes in a flying lap of around about 1 minute and 45 seconds. Thanks for your company. Bye to you all.
Let's go, let's go. Yeah, let's go! David Coulthard wins the Australian Grand Prix. Kimi Raikkonen wins his first Grand Prix. Chris Fisichella, his first win in Formula One. Wins at Monaco. Juan Montoya wins at Monaco. It's a Williams 1-2, and they are really in the championship hunt. Yes, Rubens, you are the winner of the 2003 British Grand Prix. Fernando Alonso becomes the youngest man ever to win a Formula One Grand Prix.
We're always there, we always fight. It's just a huge, big family, which we all be proud of being a part of it.